in the coming year, especially during China's annual parliamentary season. However, what does stimulus policies mean, and how will it work with the growth potential, especially in the transformation of the Chinese economy? That is the question to be asked. Meanwhile, are the Chinese consumers really spending? I'm sure everybody is asking that question. Well, I'm no expert of either of these questions, but I'm so happy here to be joined by such a strong panel representing very different sectors and also can bring us from the ground some really fresh information and insights. So it's my great honor to introduce our panelists. I will start from the order of a sequence given by the organizer. Lady first, of course, Bonnie Chan, Chief Executive Officer of the Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing from Hong Kong SAR. Bonnie, good to see you. Thank you so much. Ho Qijun, President of China National Petroleum Corporation, otherwise known as CNPC. Mr. Ho, Ho 总, 您好, 谢谢您.
Good morning, Mr. Ho. Thanks very much for being here.
Be joined by someone who everybody knows here at the World Economic Forum, Mr. Zhu Min, member of the Senior Expert Advisory Committee from the China Center for International Economic Exchanges from China. Meanwhile, he also served as a member of the Board of Trustees for the World Economic Forum. Mr. Zhu, good to see you, Dr. Zhu.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last but certainly not least, the gentleman sitting on my immediate left, Michael Suess, Executive Chairman of Oerlikon, Switzerland. This gentleman has been working with China for more than 25 to 26 years. I just learned this morning. Good to see you. So, I remember Professor Schwab at the very opening of the forum this year. He said, we all need to have a spirit, something called constructive optimism. Did I remember that right? Constructive optimism. With that in mind, let's share the number of China's GDP reached its target around 5%. That's the latest news. But even with that number, many are thinking, Dr. Zhu, since you are a great friend, I tap on you first. Is China ready for both the opportunities and the challenges of a Trump 2.0, the Chinese economy?
Wow, that's a wake-up question.
Yeah, indeed. Everybody wake up.
I mean, number one, Trump is unpredictable, right? Predict unpredictable is almost impossible. But it's morning, so I'm still in half of my sleep, so I can say something. I cannot remember, maybe later. I think number one, Trump is unpredictable. But Chinese say, you not only listen to what the people says, you watch what he does. So this is very important. He says so many things, but we'll see what he will do. Right? Yesterday, he announced he will import 10% tariff on China sometime next month, so we don't know. But the second point is also important. I think there's a huge room for these two countries to work together and create a huge benefit for both countries. It's much, much bigger than two countries fight to each other, have a winner or loser. We even don't know who will win, who will lose. China still have a $320 billion trade surplus with the US. This is a lot of room to work with, right? Chinese companies would love to invest in US. Now we are doing the reverse technology transfer, like EV, batteries, all those other things. Those things. Fentanyl is another issue, right? It's a lot of concerns. So there's a lot of things that the both countries work together. I do hope, I do believe, and two countries will and can work together to find a neutral way. It's good for both and good for the whole world.
The Chinese economy, is it ready?
Yeah, but you never know, right? So third point, when you're looking for 2.0, we have to go back to what is 2.10, or what is Trump 1.0 impact on Chinese economy. Trump's 1.0 created three direct impacts. The first is on trade. The US tariff before Trump launched 301 against China is a 3.75. So this is in line with the most favorable nation tariff. At the end of last year, it's a 19.7. So the tariff actually in 7 years increased 15%. So this is really a big impact. But China keep exports roughly 450 billion to 500 billion US dollar goods to US. China keep roughly 350 billion trade surplus with US. So China really maintain its competitiveness, right? I think that's important. But still, but another side is China don't have trade growth because there's all the growth moving into the other, Asians, Mexico, and others. So Chinese market in the U.S. import share shrink from 21% to 15% now. So it does has impact on trade. I think that's one thing. The second issue is its impact on the equity market. If we look in book 2018, the Chinese equity market dropped 28%. We did a study on the post-review. We found this drop very much linked with Trump trade war because the confidence shaking and because of uncertainty and because the capital move out.
Right.
It's also very interesting if you're looking for the U.S. capital market. U.S. capital market also slim at the beginning, but both go back. And the third issue is Chinese companies start to move overseas to third place because to avoid the tariff. So if you're looking for these three things, but in the 8 years, China remains strong exports and economic growth, as you mentioned last year, 5%, so still grow. So China went through the whole thing. So you're looking for 2.0. I would say China understand much better now, I think. So the first, I think the whole strategy is make sure, we do our own business well and right. So you see China announced, you mentioned, a big stimulus package in last September, which is stabilize the market, boost the confidence, particularly support the equity market, which is sort of preparation for Trump to come back, right? And now we focus in the economic side more on domestic consumption, more on the manufacturing, sort of digitalization, and more on the green transformation.
Right.
So more on domestic market, more on the tech, and make sure we focus on domestic market. We focus on competitiveness, regardless of what happened outside China. We'll be able to survive.
Well, you mentioned several points regarding China's economy in terms of resilience, whether it's Trump 2.0 or other changes happening around the world. I guess some of those points we have to go to the experts sitting here from very different sectors about the market, the capital market. Bonnie, you have really a big say here. We are not here to do any personality assessment of any politician, by the way. We are here to talk about what would all of this mean for the economy. From the market's perspective, how are they seeing the latest, interactions between the two presidents? Okay. President and President-elect at that time, on the 17th of January, and also earlier in September, when the huge package coming out of a press conference. How did the market react, and what about the personalities now?
Okay, thank you for that question. And I think actually you're right. Capital markets is always a good bellwether to gauge sentiment. Professor Zhu mentioned the stimulus package, which was announced in late September 2024. So let's wind the clock back 1 year. I was at Davos 2024, January. And what I picked up at the time, and a lot of you would have heard the same, China is uninvestable, right? We remember we went through that phase. Now, fast forward to September 2024. As a result of the stimulus package, which I think took quite a lot of international investors by surprise, all of a sudden they felt, we need to get back in, and very quickly, because the momentum was so ferocious. And let me put that in context. So take Hong Kong, our exchange, as an indication of the level of activity, and I would say it's spectacular. For the first 6 months of 2024, our average daily trading volume was around 100 billion Hong Kong dollars. Immediately after the stimulus package was announced, in the short course of 2 weeks, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange broke record 3 times in terms of the average daily trading volume. The first time we broke it, it was around 450 billion. A few days later, 506. The third time we broke it, which is the current record, 620 billion. 6 times what we did for the first half of 2024. And if you look at it in a more granular fashion, there were two forces in action. One, it's the fact that overseas investors have to come in. Remember, this is end of September, early October, the beginning of Q4. Fund managers around the world are looking at it and say, oh, finally, the stimulus package that we asked for a long time has arrived. And the stock market has corrected positively so ferociously that if they don't come in, they fear that they're missing out. And therefore, we saw a huge amount of what we call northbound trading. This is foreign investors taking advantage of the Stock Connect program to invest into the domestic Chinese stock market. The record was broken again, and on the current record of northbound trading is actually 510 billion RMB. This is a high number. That's the first force in place. The second force in place was actually what we call southbound investment. And what is meant by that is retail investors, mainly retail investors in mainland China, taking advantage again of the Stock Connect program to invest in the Hong Kong stock market. And I'll tell you that the current record is 280 billion Hong Kong dollars. That was on the 8th of October, right after everyone has come back from the National Day holiday. And it's actually a very good phenomenon. I think where you mentioned consumption, right? The reason that we are seeing consumption being a little anemic in China is because people are saving, right? They rather just hold on to the saving in terms of deploying that money into either consumption or investment. And that's a problem. But I don't think that's a huge issue, because I prefer that, right, saving and not consuming, to borrowing and consuming. I mean, that's my personal view.
Interesting.
Yep.
We're going to come back to you about that consumption question, because everybody wants to have an answer to that.
But let me just quickly finish. I do want to leave time for the other speakers. I think imagine you are a retail investor in China right now. It is frustrating as well, because you need to generate return. And if you're not buying real estate, if you're not investing in the domestic market, if you keep your money in the savings account, it's yielding you very, very little. And therefore, I think what we all need to do is to bring back that confidence. I think once that confidence is back and people are now willing to take the money out of the bank account, put it in either consumption or the capital markets investment, that will generate the return, which will create that virtuous circle. And I think that's when we can see the momentum grow.
We see China is going through a transformation, structural transformation, especially when it comes to green transformation. Earlier, you have heard from the Vice Premier from China yesterday at the opening ceremony, talking about how large that transformation has been and what it means for everybody. I guess there's no better person to go among this panel than to Mr. Ho, coming from a leading energy company, not only in China, but also globally. Mr. Ho, though, this morning trying to tell me once and again in the green room that we are in the green transformation. That's the key word he always wants to tell me this morning. Ho 先生.
So, Mr. Ho, I would like to ask you a couple of things here. China has this green transformation. You are a multinational. What is the speed, efficiency, and direction like that for you? And what is it ultimately going to mean for the Chinese economy? You may want to wear your headphones for this one. Well, no, that's a rather good question, actually. I, as president of China National Petroleum Corporation, our main business, of course, is oil, but we are in our own transformation, and that's ongoing. We're transforming into an oil, natural gas, and thermal generation, electric power, and hydrogen company. China is a developing country, and so industrialization and urbanization are still ongoing. in the country. Energy is a driver of this process and a primary product, and the demand continues to evolve for it. In the first quarter of the 21st century, China's GDP has been at an annual average of about 8%. Energy demand has been growing at about 6%. In 2024, China's energy growth was 4%, GDP growth was 5%. Now, what we have here is a large developing country with an interaction between energy and GDP growth, especially growth in electricity demand, which is a bellwether. And electricity growth last year was 7%. In manufacturing and services, you had a lot of internet demand and data center demand, which was running at over 10% in terms of electricity. Now, energy is going to be playing a key role in the green transition. So, obviously, as a petroleum company, we have a sense of crisis, and we are approaching the low-carbon green transition with a three-step plan. Firstly, clean replacements. We are not only a big energy producer, but also a big energy consumer. We can replace a lot of consumption with electrification and green electricity. We can replace a lot of petroleum demand with that. Secondly, we are working hard to develop new energies. CNPC in northwest and northeast China has a lot of mineral resources. Now, we have geothermal, solar, and wind resources, which are quite rich in these places. So we're trying to develop them in tandem with oil and gas. Our goal is by 2035 that oil and gas and new energy each take up about a third of the pie. By 2050, we have the goal that China's carbon emissions peak. And so our third step of the process is the green transition. We aim at that point that all types of green energy, including hydrogen, account for about 50% of the mix by 2050. We are developing a lot of wind and solar in northeast and northwest China. Also, we have a lot of geothermal resources, and we're starting some pilots with hydrogen. We're transforming some of our petrol stations to places where you can also refill with hydrogen, and we have some pilots in cities of Beijing and Shanghai.
现在这个加快转型，现在您说分3。
So we're talking about speeding up the transformation. You talked about 3 steps. Now, how are they going now? Can you briefly introduce that? So we have a very heavy sense of crisis. So we're speeding up our new energy layouts. We are accelerating or increasing our investment. In the past, we invest not enough. Over the past years, our investment were mainly in the sector of new energy, clean energy, and we also invested in the nuclear fusion in order to achieve a second or third growth trajectory. So we're implementing a lot.
Mr. Seuss, go to you. Your company is one of the most advanced in terms of technology in your sector. But maybe not many people know that you are also a leading name in manufacturing machinery, especially concerning textile. You told me earlier that you've been in China 26 years, you yourself, because the textile industry interacted with you intensely. Can you tell us more when China is going through this structural reform? Mainly the traditional manufacturing sector are, leaving, well, the new transformation, like Mr. Ho was describing, are taking place. How is the manufacturing sector doing? In this case, the textile. Can you provide more specific picture for us?
So first and above, let me say that our company, Oerlikon, is even 60 years in China active. Yes. And I was participating in different areas of manufacturing in China by working in jet engines and in power plants. So in Siemens Energy, we built almost all gas-fired power plants in China. I did a 65,000 megawatt coal-fired power plants there in my period. So the amazing part is, and that's the challenging part as well, China has developed impressive. And we have to be aware that the world would not have created that wealth without the Chinese growth the last 30 years. Vice versa, China would never have achieved that only on their own without all the interaction with Europe and the US mainly. So, and this gives me this challenge towards, first, open borders, because that was where companies like ours and my previous companies always participated in this open sky and these open borders to exchange technology, not in a naive way. There was always certain geopolitical questions even 30 years ago, but in a way that you can work and trust together. So, and trust and confidence is, as you have said already, it's the base for all economy. What I have seen, I'll give you an example in AM, at Advanced Manufacturing, 3D printing. When I was 2014 in Tsinghua University, it was basic. When I was 2019 there, it was already equal to that what we did in Europe and US. And actually, it's full top-notch what China is doing there. Manufacturing, I was a year ago, last time there. I was not there last year, I have to say. I was so busy in other areas. A year ago, when we visit my customers on the coding part, where we do coding for cutting industry, cutting tools, molds, medical, all these industries, they're top-notch. There's no distance to anything what you find in Europe or in the US. That was maybe 10, 15 years ago was different. The big challenge is for China on the energy sector, for example, which leads into manufacturing because you need a lot of energy and you have to grow there, that the last 10 years, China reduced the coal-fired based electricity from 80 to 60%, but it's still 60%. And the economy is growing. So 60% from something bigger is maybe not 80% of something smaller, but maybe it's 70% of the past. So but the percentages, the coal impact in China is still massive. And it's strategic because China has top-notch coal in huge amounts. So from a strategic perspective, you have to get out of a source which you have on your own, and you have to get in other sources, and it's not the renewables. Renewables is today 18% in China. Nuclear is only 4%. So and this challenges, on one hand, to grow economy, to build back consumer trust, and to compete internationally in a new world where there is more competition. There is not, with the fall of the iron fence, some of the old behavior, bilateral, whatever, walked away. President Trump, businessman, but he is a dealer. He wants to have bilateral relations. So countries, we had a discussion on Sunday about Asia-European relation. It's multipolar. So you have to find, we as a company have to find our way in which areas we can do work in China without conflicting our work in Europe or in the US. So can I do defense activities in China, actually? No, I cannot. Can I work on energy? Yes, I can. Can I work in medical? I can do. So we have to find our way, how we keep working together, because only then we can grow wealth, and we have to grow wealth because there are still a lot of people very poor on this planet.
Yeah.
And we have to develop manufacturing because in the end, don't take me wrong, but bits and bytes you cannot eat and you cannot sit on. If you don't have a manufacturing sector, you don't have a sector who is creating a lot of jobs. And in the end, it's about of jobs. People need a work where they can rely on and where they can spend money out of their salaries.
Okay,
and if we don't work on this manufacturing sector, we lose a huge opportunity.
Yeah. Well, one could tell from which sector Mr. Seuss is coming from. Dr. Zhu, having said that, though, that debate is vibrant, not only in China, but also all over the world. You see that reflected in so many elections last year. Almost half of the world's population went to elections, and there's the incumbent, and there's coming parties, and that certainly reflected. Having said that, though, how do you see the discussions all of the answers coming from the other three panelists really reflect that. The lively discussions going on in China about the directions of the economy and the speed of making that change, given the fact there are external uncertainties, there are also internal factors that needs to be improved. Dr. Zhu.
Well, that would take another 3 hours.
I know, but the first question already could take 3 hours.
3 minutes if I can do. I mean, the China growth model usually based on three things. The first, infrastructure investments, which account for more than 50% of the GDP. Return is so low, it's gone. The second, the engine is very much on the exports, right? Given the external environment, it's more or less gone. The third engine is on real estate. It's overcapacity. You know, it's really in a big issues. It's gone, right? So all gone. So what China do? To given the situation, China think of should focus on more on domestic market. I think it's very important. We need a three new growth engine. Domestic consumption is number one. Number two, make sure the Chinese manufacturing becomes stronger because this is the key competitiveness of China's economy. China's manufacturing account roughly 30.3% of global GDP. Yeah. It really is equal to total of the US plus Japan plus Germany plus South Korea together. So it's a huge manufacturing. The whole thing is whether we can make sure its part continue, move up the value chain. So in the 40 years China economic reform, in the first 20 years, Chinese people working so hard, labor cost so low. We make made in China is cheap. So in the next 20 years, because we improve the quality, so made in China means cheap and good. Okay. Now we try to digitalize manufacturing. So in the next 20 years, we'll make sure made in China means cheap, good, and high technology.
All right.
So I think that's the way to go. The third is a green transformation, as Mr. Hao just mentioned. I can tell you it's very interesting. The China's green transformation story is very different from here, from whatever. I mean, people talk climate change more in international arena, but China think the green transformation is a real economic growth thing because it solves China's energy security issue. Well, we import a quarter of global oil, a quarter of global gas, which is not sustainable, right? We pollute air, water, and the soil, which is not sustainable. So green transformation gives China a window opportunity to move to a sustainable approach. This is important. Move very fast, as Mr. Hong mentioned. I can tell you today, the solar power cost is only 50% of a coal power cost today. Coal power will come because the cost. Everybody talk about Chinese EV. Chinese EV roughly half cost of whatever comparable same level European cars. It is the cost, it is the efficiency. So the green transformation is really become the growth engine now. So I think that's very important.
But Mr. Zhu, the more you talk, some member among our audience feel more threatened because China is so much, as you said, efficiency, low cost, and what is the job for everybody else?
That's a good question because today manufacturing is, before the manufacturing is a scale. Scale is the cost, right? It's efficiency. But now it's also technology because iteration, because everything is digitalized. So you have a scale, that means you have a low cost efficiency and also high price margins. So I think that's the real thing. So I think that's the reason China needs to open the world to invest in the whole world. The whole world would love to work with China. China can do the technology transfer investments. I think this has become ever more important.
Yeah, just to be fair, I give Mr. Seuss a little bit more time also to respond to that. And then I, of course, go to Mr. Ho and Bonnie as well. So please, Mr. Seuss, you only have a limited time, please.
So I only want to jump on that. I think to have this growth in China, we participate on that. And you mentioned the textile industry. Textile industry, China is leading and is employing millions of people. The case is we create as well customers. as more as we do, as we grow manufacturing sector, we create customers in China as well. China has 1.3 billion people, but not all of them are rich people. There is still a lot of poverty there. So with growing of manufacturing sector, then this is what we have seen after Second World War as well in Europe. To grow with the manufacturing sector, you grow customers. With the customers, you grow demand. And with this green energy change, and you're right, China paid a high bill on soil and air and water within the last 30 years to do this industrial development they have done. So, and we participate with technology, and it's not there will be always competition, but the competition in a way that if you compete each other, in total, we all will win. If we try to exclude competition, we get lazy, we get poor, we rely on ourselves. So protectionism, and you can study that the last 100 years, wherever a society tried to keep their work by protectionism, they lost. In the end, they lost. Maybe you can say 5 or 10 years, but then you lose. The only answer is be innovative, as our company is doing since 120 years. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist. Question whatever you do and make it better every day, every morning, which we could learn in China the last 30 years, but not only in China. Europe, seen as the museum of the world, is still one of the big innovation areas in this planet. And they only limit themselves sometimes by the targets they're giving them. But US, Europe, China, the big blocs, they can drive so much together if they work together. They may have different political opinions. We have to deal with that. Different views, we have to deal with that. But if we stop the competition in a positive sense, if we stop the openness to work together, we will not develop the next 20 years in a way how we have developed the last 20 years.
Got it. Okay. Mr. Ho, this is very interesting about how...
In Chinese.
Yeah.
Chinese.
But I will... it's very interesting how we are seeing this discussion about how China fits into the global landscape and the other way around. 但是我就想特别请教侯总。
I wish to raise a question to Mr. Ho. As a big company, as a champagne company, and how does your company position yourself at the international level, and how do you face competition and opportunity? Thank you for your question.
是不是把别人的工作都拿走了呀？
Did you take the jobs of everyone else?
是，就是没有其他人没有机会了。
Did you take the opportunity of other people? Or do you only earn profit for yourself? Or do you think there can be a collaboration and win-win? We are a SOE, but also we are an international company in oil sector. Domestically, we supply 50% of oil and 30% of natural gas. And also in accordance with the Belt and Road Initiative, we have been investing in overseas for the past 3 decades. At present, we have invested in over 30 countries in oil sector, and also we're investing in 80 countries in the manufacturing sector and so on. So we are an example of Chinese companies going international. Over the last 13 years, first of all, we have been learning from our peers at the international level, and we are trying hard to comply with the international standard, to respect local laws and regulations, to compete in a fair, transparent manner. We are also cooperating with big oil companies in Africa, in Middle East, and Russia. A lot of projects are going on there. So we are trying to be rule-based. And secondly, we're working, try to achieve a win-win. And when investing in, for example, in Africa, in Middle East, we pay much more attention to our social responsibility of the company, of enterprise. We pay much attention to religion and culture and livelihoods. We have been donating, investing for some small but nice projects. We try to melt in with the local population to garner their support. And apart from investing in oil and gas, we are also investing in, for example, renewable energies in Africa, in Middle Asia. For instance, the PV projects. And we also, so what kind of opportunities did you create for local people? We took some stock. Our localization rate achieved 85%, which means we hired over 100,000 local people overseas, and we also contribute to the social development.
Thank you for the information.
In the countries where we invest.
Earlier, you really want to comment. Would you like to do that, or shall I lead you with your?
No, I'll make a comment. I think, going back to that term, that phrase, constructive optimism, I want to first echo what Michael mentioned. And I think Professor Klaus Schwab picked those words quite carefully, right? Optimism, I think we sort of know what it is. What do we mean by constructive? My personal interpretation, two things, okay? Both competition and collaboration. And those two can actually go hand in hand. In Chinese, there's a term called 竞合, right? Competition and collaboration, going hand in hand. Now, going back to Mr. Zhu's comment on the three things which China wants to focus on: domestic consumption, uplifting manufacturing quality, and green transformation. And that green transformation is an area I feel that this spirit of collaboration and competition could be best manifested. Why do I say it? I actually issued an article on the Web Forum a week ago, which talks about how China can help the world in the green transition. Now, of course, China is doing it for its own reasons as well. And by the way, I'm sure every one of you in the last few days have heard a lot about AI. And AI, one critical ingredient to make it successful is obviously energy, the computing power. That consumes a lot of energy. So I'm sure, with the work that, for example, Mr. Hao is doing, that gives a very guaranteed source of energy, which will help in that AI journey.
I see.
However, more importantly, I think as China is going to do all things to achieve the targets, the carbon neutrality targets, we have not forgotten about the rest of the world. I mean, so many countries, where you're all from, have already stated targets to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 or 2060, whenever it is. The million-dollar question to me is still, how do we get there? How do we get there? Without the technology, without the innovation, it's very difficult. And the cost, right, it could be prohibitive. And therefore, I think in the course of competing, let's also not forget about how we can, on a collaborative manner, come up with a solution that everyone can actually make use of, so that we don't just throw these objectives out. And by the time we get to 2050, everyone just struck their shoulders and say, well, we missed the boat.
Right. Earlier, we promised everybody we're going to talk about the domestic consumption. Are the Chinese consumers really buying? Are they really consuming? So we have very limited time. If you could just within 30 seconds give your perspective, will be really welcome. Maybe we start from Mr. Seuss. 30 seconds only, because we also want to leave some time for the audience to ask questions. Okay, the clock is on.
25 will still be difficult in the consumer attitude. What we see clear indication about a growing out of the textile industry again in 26. So orders are picking up, and orders can only pick up if there's some trust. But 25 still will be somehow a little bit flat year.
I see. 侯先生，中国的消费者在消费。
Mr. Ho, are Chinese consumers out to consume? How do we get them to consume more? 2025 is going to be a year where the key task is to stimulate the economy through consumption. I'm quite confident about that, particularly with people's desires for a better life. There's going to be demand for new products. But you have to give people real support, so employment, pensions, and so on. Yeah, so you have to increase their income.
Oh, just one word: confidence. Okay, you need to bring back confidence, then people will start consuming.
It's a whole lot of discussion as to how to bring back the confidence. Thank you very much. We're going to follow on that in the future. Dr. Zhu.
Chinese consumption is way low from macro level, right? Total 52% is way low. I mean, it's very clear. The Chinese consume on goods is not necessarily low. It accounts for 32% of GDP, which is very much in line with Chinese GDP in terms of $30,000 per capita. And actually, the 32 will drop gradually because we will consume less material goods, consume more service. Because you need a development service consumption. What is service? Health, education, tourist, culture, sports, all those things is so small.
All right, then. Well, we are having a great potential in those sectors. We have 2.5 minutes left. I'm so sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Very limited time for Chinese economy. Anyone raise your hand? We collect the question, then we let them answer. Please. Yes. Thank you so much. Can you do a very quick question? Yeah.
My name is Kabelo Masike from Eskom, South Africa.
Yeah, the question is?
The need for renewable energy in Southern Africa, quite massive. Opportunities to collaborate with Chinese companies, but the domestic requirement to uplift domestic production and industrialization. Is it now a conflict between collaboration and competition, or is there somewhere there where we can meet?
Got it. Especially with the Global South in a way, right? Okay. Any other questions? Please, this lady in the very front row.
Can AI help in the research of nuclear fusion? Because, as we know, nuclear fusion can give us a lot of energy, but everyone is afraid of the devastation.
AI and nuclear together. Okay. What kind of chemistry would that come out? All right. Any other question? No? Well, it seems that we are covering all issues. Very quickly to respond to China's collaboration or competition with the Global South. Anyone want to touch on that? Dr. Zhu?
Well, I just give you one example. One Chinese company set up the solar power company in Saudi. It's close, but not in South Africa anyway. The cost is 1 cent of US dollar, 1 kilowatt power.
Take the nuclear.
It's absolutely stunning, lowest level in the world. The only thing we need to do is to make sure it's a small scale, independent, solar, storage, grill, distribution, and the usage, put them together, financed by the REIT system.
Yeah.
So then the model can expand the whole continent.
Got it. 侯先生，要不然您也请您简单的回应一下，因为您的。
Well, we may ask Mr. Ho to come in on this because you're active in very many parts of the Global South. Well, talking about Africa, there's a lot of resources that can be used for new energy in Africa. We have a lot of projects and a lot more that we have under discussion in African countries to develop new energy in Africa. There needs to be more commitment to infrastructure, particularly to power grid development in Africa, but we're ready to work together with African countries. So it's a whole ecosystem cooperation.
To the other question, AI nuclear. Yeah, briefly, Sus, and also Mr. Zhu, please.
So short term, not?
Short term, very short.
On short term, you will not have the fusion solution, with or without AI. There will be a nuclear comeback. The question will be, are we doing that on the third generation as we had? And do we get the supply basis? Or are we ready to go for the fourth generation? If we go for the third, we still have to answer what happens with the nuclear waste, which is still not answered.
Another whole set of fascinating questions to come as a result of that.
Yeah, if I can add one thing, because this is absolutely important. I think AI is the most important instruments to support fusing nuclear today. Because in the US, you know NIF, right? because the AI is because laser beam, we first time produce the power more than input power the first time. In China, there are two models, laser-based model, tomahawk-based model, also supported by AI system. So with the AR, I'm now become more optimistic to see the fusion nuclear is coming.
Yeah.
But computer with 1 cent of a dollar, 1 kilowatt of solar power, it's not all clear, future's fusing nuclear or solar. I just said a year ago, everybody say future is fusing nuclear, but today it's not all clear.
All right, thank you very much. Bonnie, I think you really need to touch on that question as well. How will the stock exchanges and others encouraging these new options of technologies? Very briefly, please.
Very brief. Okay, whatever we do you need funding. You need funding so that people can innovate, can create new technologies, can cooperate, can collaborate, can compete. The stock exchange does one simple thing. We match capital with opportunities. So if we can do our part to bring the capital so that all these economic activities and innovation can continue, we're very happy.
Thank you very much. On that note, we are wrapping up this discussion. 45 minutes about Chinese economy. Can we really do that? Well, mission seems to be quite possible, at least for now. But there are many other questions we haven't touched on about the, the real estate issue, the local government debts. Many of those already, in a way, related to the answer. We hope we'll have future opportunities to discuss them. Hopefully, there will be great results a year from now. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, once again. And thank you so much for everyone in the panel.